Hello, I'm Riley Lee. I'm going to show you how I hold the shakuhachi. Relaxed hands, that's the most important thing. This is not a relaxed hand. That is a relaxed hand. You take that relaxed hand and you just drape it over the finger holes. So the bottom hand, index finger and ring finger, notice that the middle finger goes where it wants to go. It's not lined up. It's not like that. It's a bit further forward because that's the relaxed way to do it. The thumb, again, relaxed hand, thumb is there. Place the hand like that. The thumb just goes where it wants to be, relaxed. But instead of holding it like that, using the pad of your thumb, what I do is, because the flute's like this, I actually rest the flute on the side of my thumb. In this case, I've got a joint of the bamboo there, it kind of rests there, but it doesn't matter whether it's wherever that is. There's a bit of play there, but that thumb is very strong that way, and it takes the weight of the bamboo so that these top fingers are very, very relaxed. In fact, I can almost balance it on that thumb. The top hand is the same. Not relaxed, not relaxed, not relaxed, relaxed. Place the fingers over those holes. Now, in this case, there is a thumb hole, there's a back hole, so the thumb has to, of course, cover that hole. But it doesn't have to be straight up and down like that. That's a bit, you can see from the front view, it's maybe a bit awkward. You don't want to play it like that. You don't want to play it like that either. Shoulders relaxed, elbows relaxed. The thumb is kind of at an angle. You can see that. Now I have to say, do as I say, don't do as I do, because I notice a lot of times when I'm performing, in, for example, videos of my performances, my fingers are all tight. But I also notice that sometimes when I do that, I can see myself relaxing my fingers too. If you notice your fingers are tight or they're locked or whatever, you want to just relax them while you're playing, when you can. Start with a relaxed hand. Try to keep the hand relaxed. Check yourself while you're playing. Get in the habit of doing a relaxed check. If your fingers are back like that, that's not a relaxed hand. Whenever you see your fingers behind your flute, bring them forward. That is how I would hold a standard length shakuhachi. Okay, next is a 2.1, a bit longer than the 1.8. The holes are still straight. In the front, same principle, except instead of the hand being completely relaxed, I may have to open the distance between my fingers a little bit. Drape the hand so that the fingers close the holes. The thumb is in the back. Again, the thumb is taking the weight of the bamboo, not on the pad of the thumb, but the side of the thumb. Top hand, relaxed hand, not a relaxed hand, not a relaxed hand. That hand drapes over the flute as well. And the thumb, again, approaches that back hole. It approaches the back hole at the angle that it's most comfortable. Okay. So that's the 2.1. Okay, the next flute I have is a 2.4. The fundamental is A. But again, in this particular flute, the holes are straight. Same principle. Again, I have to open my hands a bit more. Relaxed hand, but they're slightly open. Drape the fingers over the flute in the most relaxed way. The thumb comes behind the flute to hold up the flute. Top hand relaxed. It's a relaxed hand. Drapes over the holes, and the thumb approaches that hole in a most relaxed manner. When you get a new flute in particular, and particularly a long flute, it's really a good idea to just get used to where the finger holes are. Don't rush. Of course, you want to play the flute. You want to make it sound, but just sitting here, holding the flute, is very good practice. I don't even have to put the flute to my mouth. Just sitting like that, or like that, or like that, I get used to where those holes are. If your hands are, for example, smaller than mine, and you get a flute, a 2.4, or even the 2.1, and you find that it's just doesn't seem right, there are several ways to help. With the top hand, you can always use your little finger to cover that second hole instead of the third finger. So I've got that covered, and it takes very little time to get used to that. The bottom hand, instead of using the pads of those fingers, because you can see there is a kink in the wrist. There was one with the 2.1, but this is more because as I bring my hand down, that kink becomes bigger as I bring the hand down. Kink becomes more. So to get rid of that kink, I start playing the flute like that. I have the hole covered by this part of my finger. Now I could use this part of my finger too. And that reduces the kink and makes it more comfortable. The thumb is still doing the main job. Or I could go all the way in so that the flute is inside the thumb and the index finger, touching the webbing between those two fingers. So that's the 2.4 with the straight holes. Okay, now I have a 2.4, but the third hole is off-centered. And that makes this top hand a little bit easier. So instead of having to come over here, it's a little more comfortable. The bottom holes are straight, and with this flute, I just tend to hold it, like I mentioned before, all the way in. But you could hold it a little bit further out. And some people could still, perhaps with arms shorter than mine, would find it just as comfortable to do it the normal way. But once you reach this length instrument, if you practice it a lot, having your wrist like that can cause troubles. In my late 30s, I developed ganglia here several times, probably from playing the flute like this too much. So I always use it this way. So that's 2.4 with off-centered third hole. Okay, next is a G flute, 2.6, 2.7. And with this flute, the bottom hole is also off-centered. If this bottom hole was straight, I'd have to, again, bend a little bit. This way, notice my wrist is almost straight, very comfortable. Now, here's a point. As you get these bigger flutes, ideally you have them made by a maker that you can communicate with, and you can choose where the holes are placed. And by that I mean not where the holes are placed up and down the flute, because the maker has to determine that. It's the pitch. The pitch determines that. But this hole, for example, doesn't have to be here. It can be here, here. It can be anywhere along this circumference, the same circumference. And in fact, the original hole was here. I found that uncomfortable with my shape of my fingers. So I had the maker move that hole over to make it more comfortable. Originally it was there, now it's there. And that just that little bit makes this flute much more comfortable for me, from there to there. And everything else is, as per what I was saying before, as relaxed as you can make them. Sometimes the fingers, as they get stretched, they tend to tense up a little bit more than when they were totally relaxed, but the goal is to have them relaxed. Likewise, I could always use this little finger. If your hands look too tense or straight, try to relax them. You can see the difference between this and that. So that's a real important goal, is to learn how to hold these flutes relaxed. Holding them without playing them. A very important exercise. So this is the 2.6, 2.7 G flute. Okay, now we're getting into the length of flutes where the actual measurement doesn't really matter so much. It's as much to do with the diameter of the bore as the length. This flute measures 3.1, but it's a very narrow flute, as you can see. It's not a fat flute, and it plays an F. Now, here's the utaguchi. Now, if I look down the length of the flute, none of the holes line up with the utaguchi. This hole is a little bit to the right, this hole is way to the left, and both of these holes are a bit to the left. And that makes sense, because as my hand gets further and further down, it's easier to start holding the flute like that instead of trying to, again, keep those holes in the right straight line. The way I had this flute made for me by a maker in Japan, Yamaguchi, Shugetsu, he showed me the piece of bamboo before any of the holes were drilled, and he had a pencil line around the entire circumference of where every hole was. He says, okay, hold the flute where it's comfortable. So I would line up all my fingers with those lines, and I said, yeah, I think that's about it. That's about as comfortable as I can make it. And then he just put pencil markings where the holes were, and then drilled the holes. So these holes are placed specifically for my fingers, for my arms, and I find it a very comfortable instrument to play. The stretch is big, of course, but it's not that big. It's doable. And I don't need to do that. I could. That's even more comfortable. But I find this just as comfortable, and I'm more used to that. So this, the F flute, the 3.1 flute, Okay, this is my longest flute made by Mr. Kurita. It's a 3.6. It's a very, very fat flute. And it's just about exactly twice the length of a 1.8. So if we measure them the best we can here, so it's a little bit shorter than twice the distance or the length of a 1.8, but this is so much fatter. And so it's the dimension of the bore, it's the volume of the bore more than the length that determines the pitch. In any case, this flute is exactly an octave below the 1.8. It's a D, and the holes are even more aligned or misaligned in relationship to the utaguchi. There is no hole again. Here's the utaguchi. There's no hole that lines up exactly with that front part. This one almost does, but it's not quite. You can't even see some of the holes. The third hole is way over here. And the bottom hole is way over there. And yet, let's see, this is the front of the flute. So you can see the 2 and the 4 hole, but that's it. They're all way over. Same principle though. Instead of resting the flute on the thumb, I'm resting it again in the webbing of my hand. This finger again uses that same part of the finger to close it, and this finger does the same. And then, whoa, I gotta get it down to so that I can get my mouth to it. So my hand is pretty much outstretched. That's a bit uncomfortable, and you can see my fingers are not in that curved, relaxed position that I showed you in the beginning, but they're not that uncomfortable. The top hand, same principle. Hold here, hold over there. Now this one, the hole is so far over that the top hand is not holding up the flute at all. It's not behind there like that, it's way over here. So I'm just kind of coming to the side, but you can see if I have a relaxed hand, I stretch it as far as I can, that's where my fingers go. So the goal is to get the finger holes to match up where the fingers are in their most relaxed position, however that might be. So you can see it from the side, relaxed hand, open the hand, and bang, they fit those holes perfectly. Because this top hand can no longer help hold the flute, and of course this flute is a very heavy flute because there's a lot of bamboo to it, I tend not to play it standing up. I can, but I wouldn't want to do that for a long time, and I certainly don't practice standing up. And in fact, it's hard for me to use this flute, practice playing this flute sitting seiza, or on my knees, because I need to rest it on something. Sitting down like this is ideal, partly because I don't want to have the flute straight out in front of me like this. You see how my shoulder looks a bit weird? If I have it off to the side, see how that shoulder relaxes? The arm relaxes? Not relaxed, relaxed. And that just fits onto my knee perfectly. So now you can see this is a relaxed shoulder. Fingers are as relaxed as they can be. And this hand is very relaxed. Now, a hint, when you first get your big long flute, do try to get row first. Don't be disappointed if you don't, because probably holes are leaky holes, because your fingers are stretched more than they are used to. The best way to do it is to start with the top hand, the holes open, you can get that note pretty easily, and then work on your way down. So then the next toe, then the next toe, typically it's the 2 or the 3 finger that leaks, so if you can get that far, that's great. And if you can play the 2, usually you can get that row. If you go that's leaky holes. Okay, so start high, work your way down, and relax. For me to learn to play this flute, I first played it as much as I could, and then my arm started hurting. I was getting pains in my lower arm here. Oh, I don't want that. So I immediately stopped. And then I started to just pick up the flute, and I would only play it for about 5 minutes a day. 5 minutes once, put it aside. And then I gradually got used to it so that I attempted to try to do 2 5-minute sessions, morning and afternoon. And the afternoon session didn't hurt, so I started extending both sessions until I could do 10 minutes at a go. And I gradually worked my way up so that I got used to holding the flute. So my hands knew where they were. It's still a big stretch, it's still a strain, but now I can play this flute. I can practice this flute for hours on end. Not all day, not as long as I can play my 1.8, but I can play it long enough at least to be able to practice it. And that's what you must do. As soon as you feel some pain, stop, rest, come back to it tomorrow. Okay, back to the standard length instrument. Feels like a toy. It's so easy to hold now, having played those long flutes. By the way, when you first get your different flute, your longer length flute, you'll find that it's hard to switch from one flute to the next, and that's just to be expected. You're having to adjust. It's a good thing. You're becoming more flexible. With flexibility comes control and strength. So by learning to go back and forth to switch from one length flute to the other length flute, both flutes will eventually sound better. You'll get better at playing both flutes. So I look forward to hearing your comments. Please leave your comments below. Please subscribe to my channel if you find this interesting, and I'm open to suggestions. See you next time.